Hey guys, welcome back to another edition of Cover One Buffalo. We're back at it here. I got Erik with me tonight. It's just me and you, man. How you doing tonight?
Not too bad, man. No complaints here. Nice day up in North Country and ready to talk some football.
It's God's country up there, right?
It
That's what
really
they
is
say.
God's country.
Yeah. That's awesome. Yeah, it felt like a really long day yesterday without football, without any news. Obviously, people had articles and stuff coming out, but no football. We've been spoiled in this last week, so we get it back today, though.
Yeah, definitely, man. And it was kind of nice to have a little reprieve, but like everyone else, I mean, we're all working, trying to put out some content for everyone. And, there's a few articles up that, came out this morning. We have an article from Nick on RPOs, and he writes for the Giants for us. But again, Cover One's not just about Bills. It's not just about other teams, the Giants and Cowboys, but it's about, learning. It's about X's and O's. And the RPO article that he put out this morning was really cool. So if you're interested in learning a little more about RPOs, definitely hit him up. Hit that article up on cover1.net.
Yeah, and speaking of cover1.net, make sure you get over there and check it out. You can add the notifications to your computer so you can get them on your desktop, or if you have to go on the App Store, download the app, you can get the notifications right to your phone whenever we're dropping knowledge. And it's funny you bring up education because today in the Slack channel, man, that thing was rip roaring. It's getting better almost every day.
It's cool, yeah.
Yeah, it's really picking up, and I'm learning a ton because guys are asking questions that I don't even think to ask you. I'm always hitting you up asking questions about stuff, but guys are asking questions that I'm not even thinking about. And we're having those conversations and kind of everybody's learning together. So it really is a place to come more than just Bills. It's education about football. And we all love that.
Yeah, and what's great about that, Aaron, is like, I mean, what other formats, what other sites, what other areas or people are doing stuff like that? We're one of the few that has a community built around our website. And obviously, the Slack channel for the premium subscribers is an area where you're going to have access to all of our writers. Again, regardless of what team, regardless of what scheme, regardless of what the topic is, fantasy, X's and O's. We have a film channel. They're starting a fantasy football league, which everyone's taking part in. I mean, it's pretty cool. And it's something that that's one of the things I'm really proud about is, that little community that we're building there with, guys that just want to support our product and support our team. So I do appreciate everyone subscribing.
That's right, man. And if you want to get in on that and want to be a supporter and part of this community, head over to cover1.net, check out all the tiers of memberships, great deals right now, and get on that because, like I said on Twitter the other day that when you join that, that money goes right back into putting out the content that we put out for you. So if you like the content, you want to support that, head over there and drop us and get a premium because you get something back in return, but you're also giving us something to help us create more of this content that you love. So let's get right into it, man. Bill's back at practice today, but it was a closed practice. So we didn't see a whole lot. Got some reports on Twitter from the reporters that were there. What's up with closed practices for training camp? What's going on with that?
It's kind of weird. I thought that they, on the first day of the second week, that they went to a closed practice where only the media can watch practice. Obviously, after the first 10, 15 minutes, they can't record, they can't send anything out. So I thought that was kind of odd, especially considering it's not like they're in a game week. It's not like they're trying to do install on a Tuesday afternoon, Tuesday morning. So I thought that was kind of odd. And so I reached out to some of my friends, in the scouting community on draft Twitter and just started asking around about what their thoughts are on closing practices, this soon or in training camp. And the simple answer that Dan Hatman from the Scouting Academy, if you guys don't know him, follow him on Twitter. He is a guy that was a big mentor to me going through the Scouting Academy. He is at Dan_Hatman. He worked for the Giants, won a ring with them as a scout, as a personnel guy there. And he straight up said, it's just paranoia. It's paranoia that teams are going to steal stuff, steal plays, steal install. I don't think that's surprising, Aaron.
No.
But then I asked him further. I said, hey, okay, is there a rule against sending other scouts from other teams to open practices, to public practices? And he said he thought there was some kind of rule in place, but he couldn't confirm it in time for this show. But at the very least, like everyone else believes, any organization is trying to find an edge. Any organization could send some Joe Schmo that's not affiliated with the organization to a practice, an open practice, and record or take notes. just like any other fan does. So
Sure.
I don't think this is abnormal, that, teams close practices, but I think the underlying, sentiment here is that there is a culture of stealing, a culture of paranoia that, your opponents are going to give you the, take some notes from your practices. But it's something that I encountered this week being at camp, Aaron, and you saw it. There was I caught a lot of flack for sitting there and recording and taking notes on practices. And I'm not any different than thousands of people around, obviously Twitter, but around the league that,
Right.
does things like this. And honestly, I know a lot of people subscribe to our channel, subscribe to what we do, and appreciate what I do personally with X's and O's. But if a team is trying to look at my work to, get it up for their organization, they're in trouble already, because these guys should know more, way more than I do. So,
Yeah.
in the end, I think the close practice was kind of odd. But one of the guys on the Slack channel said maybe it's to kind of hype up everyone, because then there's no reports from actual fans, or there's no video from the actual practice. So everything is that we're taking is from the media, right?
Yeah, I do think there's a little bit of that plays into it. I think the Bills, this is me speaking, just my thoughts. I have no knowledge of this or anything like that, but I do think the Bills want to make the media feel important. I know that in the past they've done things to make the media feel important, whether it's catered lunches, snacks, things like that, going out of their way to write them notes, etc. I think that it plays into some of they want positive reporting for the team.
Sure.
They're not going to force that hand, but I think there's ways to make those guys feel important to maybe help a narrative come along. It's just human nature. When you feel good, if somebody makes you feel good, you're maybe a little less willing to put something out that's negative about them in any way. You want to maintain that relationship. So I think there's a little bit of that, fluffing each other up, making those guys feel important.
Absolutely. And you think about it, you don't like these organizations, and NFL overall has control. I mean, they have control of all the information that they want to. They can obviously deny credentials, deny whatever access. It's one of those things, like, look at the story on Josh Allen that was, recorded months ago, and they didn't want to release it until right before training camp, a week before training camp. So, the NFL does control it, and hey, that's their business. That's fine with me. And honestly, a lot of guys in the channel are asking about media creds and all that, but that was a blessing in disguise, guys, because I was able to do what I do at Cover One. And like I said, I caught a little flack about recording and breaking down plays, but guess what? That's everyone's doing it. And honestly, it's for educational purposes. I'm trying to run a site that passes on information to fans that want to learn. I mean, that was the reason for me starting Cover One. I couldn't coach anymore. I wanted to find an outlet to not only continue learning football myself, but to pass on knowledge that I do know. So it's educational, and that's what Cover One's built on, Aaron?
Yeah, no, two things on that. One, real quick, I think that the fan is changing. I've talked about this with a few people. The fan isn't the guy that picks up the newspaper anymore and just reads, the anecdotes about the game and things like that, the small stuff. The fan is changing, where they want to really dive in. They want to learn the game, and that's becoming the consumer fan. So I do think that the cover One, I mean, I'm a fan. I came to you years ago saying I'm a huge fan of what you're doing. How do I get involved in this? Because I love it. I see the vision, and I do think that new consumer fan wants this stuff. And I just don't think the NFL is there, and I don't think the media is there yet with understanding what the new fan wants. So I think, not to pat ourselves on the back a little bit, but I think what you started is a little bit ahead of the curve, and they're just not caught up yet. So, but I agree with you that it is a blessing in disguise. I don't think that everybody needs to have credentials. We get it a lot. People are always asking us, are you guys going to get credential? Are you going to show up? There's really no need for us to be there. Anytime there's a press conference, I watch it and I see the tweets. I know every single quote that comes out of one Bills drive.
Yeah, and they send out press releases and transcripts that we get too. So technically, you're right. We don't really need the credentials. What credentials do really in the end is obviously give you a pretty good status, give you a little more access to the players, and maybe better networking. But personally, for me, like when I was going out to camp, that's not really my style. Obviously, you guys follow me, so I'm more of film-based X's and O's type guy. So that's not really for me, but it's something I want for our contributors, because our contributors, some of them want to move on. And Cover One's just a stepping stone. It's a starting point. So I do want that for our guys, but it's one of those things, like, we're based in film, and if they don't let us use film, I understand that that's their prerogative. And hey, it is what it is, but you can't deny the content we've been putting out. It's been pretty fucking hot.
And there's ways to get access. You know what I mean? You don't necessarily need the press credentials to get access. Guys answer Twitter DMs, man. It really
No
does
doubt.
happen. I've talked to players on Twitter. They really do. As long as you're not annoying them or blowing them up too hard, and you can gain access that way. So that's not a concern to me. One of the other points I want to make, you talked about it, right? Like the NFL teams, the flack that you got for recording and talking about it. Obviously, this training camp has changed. Peter King talked about it a little bit today. Training camp's changed from that, like, let's work hard and get in shape. Players come into it in shape. So training camp's a teaching format now. Obviously, the team wants the public to have a view of it. It's good for the public to get excited about the team, but a lot of teaching goes on at training camp. But they're not doing anything. Like, even obviously it's new to us. What Daboll's installing here is new to us, and fans want to see it. But
Great point.
come on, man. He's been an NFL offensive coordinator before. He was just a coordinator at Alabama. Like, people have a book on Daboll, whether or not it's exactly what he's installing here. They have some book on him. So it's not like he's reinventing a brand new offense here that nobody's ever seen before.
Exactly.
That's a top secret thing. I mean, we're not unfolding any big mysteries.
I don't. And like I said, if you go to the film, the eye in the sky doesn't lie, right? I mean, you watch his practices and games from last year at Alabama. You watch his Patriots games. You search the internet, you're going to find playbooks. I mean, you're going to find old school playbooks. Maybe they don't have the same exact plays, but you can deconstruct it and break down. And that's kind of what I do. So you're right. I mean, but the concepts that he's running, they're kind of being run across the league. It's not abnormal what he's running. They do have a book on him.
It's abnormal to us in Buffalo.
It's totally true. Yeah, no, let's clear that up. No doubt about it. And I was one, I'll admit, I was a guy that liked Dennison's scheme coming from that coaching tree, the Kubiak handling. But it's night and day. We've already discussed that. And don't get me started on that, because then we'll just get on a total tangent.
Sure.
But yeah, you're right. You know, nothing is out of the ordinary overall when it comes to what Daboll's doing. And honestly, like, some of the stuff that he is running, if you just watched a couple of games last year, like I did, you know, you watched the whole season, you're going to see a lot of the same schematics. And it's not hard to just, you know, piece it together. It just takes a little time.
Yeah, and our defense, obviously, everybody knows McDermott's has a long track record of his defense, and it's not that crazy. I mean, he'll disguise it in some certain ways, but you're not going to see all that in training camp. And they head back to One Bills Drive, not that far from now. I think there's only 12 open practices total, and we're 4 in, and then they head back to One Bills Drive for the rest of the summer. And that's really where they get into the meat and potatoes of getting a game plan installed and stuff like that. They know the public is there. They're not going to give out anything that they don't want released.
And think about this. You know, you said they're not teaching anything new. You're absolutely correct. This is the second or third time that a lot of these guys are seeing these plays. They reinstall it a couple, 2 to 3 times so that, these guys can digest it. And so this is, although it's the first time we're seeing it as the public, maybe not necessarily the media, because they probably, saw it during mini camps or whatnot, maybe just couldn't put it into words or didn't know what they were seeing. But I will admit, I think the media is starting to step it up in that regard. I think that's something Tyler had mentioned in our Slack channel. I think everyone's game, and not to toot our own horn, but our affiliation with the Athletic, I think the Athletic coming to Buffalo has upped everyone's game, because as soon as they came into town, you saw the writers that were going there and the team that they assembled. I felt like everyone started upping their game and upping their writing and content. And it's good for fans, because you get several different outlets and from several different angles. And that's something Matt Fairburn said to me a little while ago when I was talking about practice today. He said, we all bring something to the team. And, at the Athletic Buffalo is the same thing when you put us in with all the national media members at the Athletic. So I think it's good for fans in the end. Even if we are breaking down plays that they're going to be running, guess what? It's something you're going to sit on your couch on Sunday, during this season, and you're going to be like, man, I remember seeing that play. I remember that block. I remember that concept. You're going to take your eyes off the ball, as Pat Kerwin said. And so I think it's just good for everybody. And we're not trying to, pull anything over on the NFL. We're actually promoting their product. And I hope they look at it that way eventually,
Yeah, I do think eventually they're going to have to catch up with it. Education, the smarter fan is the way that the sport's going. You can see with the fantasy, you can see with the analytics, everything's heading towards a smarter fan. So they'll jump on it eventually. With all that, though, so today was interesting, right? Because obviously in the past, we didn't have these film breakdowns like we do on Twitter. We didn't see the plays and see them the same way. So today was a media-only day. And 10 years ago, that's all we had, right? We would have to go find media reports and find what these guys were saying. Today, though, it felt like because we already have all this technology and we're seeing things in a new way. When they took that away from us, the fan a little bit, right? Like today, they took that away from us today. I felt very confused.
We're in the dark.
following just media tweets about what's happening, because I saw conflicting reports on plays. I saw people kind of maybe not knowing exactly what they were talking about, what they were seeing, and trying to put that into a tweet real quick to get it out. So maybe, and then you see reactions from whether it's other blogs or newspapers or national media that are taking those tweets and reactions and creating reactions off of those. So talk about that a little bit, and that dynamic of like, how do you take what the media says without seeing it?
It's hard because, for me, this isn't my primary job. And it's one of those things where when it comes to football, I'm so cynical. Like, I can't completely trust someone else's word on something unless I've actually sat down and talked X's and O's with them. So when it comes to general stuff that you're seeing at practice and the media is giving it to us, I take it with a grain of salt. I don't know if you guys are the same way, but because like you said, man, you could read, 10 different tweets and they all come in at the same time. So It's not hard. You don't have to scroll far. You're getting all these notifications in your timeline about a play that happened at practice, but then you're going to see, 2, 3 different reports or different opinions on it. So you're going to gravitate towards the one that, maybe the writer or person that you trust more. And I understand that. I mean, just like people come to us for certain things, I get that. But for me, as someone that's trying to provide that content to you, it's very hard for me to trust completely what someone else is trying to tell me about what they're seeing, especially if they, I followed them for a while and I know that, it's not their forte. I'm not a guy that's going to do an interview. Like I mentioned earlier, I admit that I'm not an interview guy. I know my place. I know my role. Sure. And some of those guys, they're just the opposite. That's what they're good at. That commentary. That's what they're good at. They're good at building rapport with the players and all that in the locker rooms and all that, and having them as sources and all that good stuff. TV, all that. That's not me. But I just take it with a grain of salt. And I always do when it comes to football and, most things. It's just like anything else in life.
Yeah, I think today really hit me to take some of that, like you said, with a grain of salt, because I saw different people saying, "Oh, McCarron won the day, Peterman won the day." You saw it all. Everybody had an opinion, and I'm sitting there saying, "I don't know what opinion I can create on this because I didn't see it." And so it's hard for me. And so when I see it, sometimes I have a different opinion than other people, but at least I can see it and have that conviction in my eye test or whatever it is. So it's tough today to get that. I saw a couple reports where somebody said, I don't know names, it doesn't matter. Allen had 2 incompletions. The defense really won that series. And then somebody else reports that one of those was a beautiful pass that went right through the wide receiver's hand. So a lot of things can be reported. Those are 2 exact same plays. And one guy saying, "Oh, he just went 0 for 2. That makes it sound like Josh Allen played poorly." And the other guy says, actually, one of those passes was a beautiful pass. The receiver dropped it. So it's a very different take on the same exact play. You're wondering how often that happens throughout training camp when you hear Lockenfora. He's one that he tweeted out that one of the passes to Kelvin Benjamin was a broken up pass. Every local reporter tweeted that it was a drop pass by Benjamin. So
you know what people are going to say? They're like, "Well, we never trust Lockenfora."
Well, but I know, but there's a number of fans that, he's got a lot of followers, and
true.
So that
he might be at Strong Memorial Hospital right now, because didn't he get tagged in the leg by Allen?
He did. He might want to keep an eye on that for any blood clots or something, because that thing bruised.
Yeah, for sure. He left a mark.
Oh, no doubt. So yeah, just take those things with a grain of salt. But the nice thing is, close practice, I don't know when the next close practice will be. So we won't have to worry about just relying on the media for that. One thing that seems to happen, and I want your take on this because we've talked about it a little bit. We talked about it on the Slack channel a little bit. This isn't to call anyone out. I understand where it kind of comes from, but seems as though in the media, you see all these guys huddled together at camp in the media. And it seems though you'll see the tweets and they're just kind of confirming their own thoughts. Which seems to be a little bit group thinky. Maybe whoever the smartest one in the group is says, this is what they're doing. And then everyone's like, yeah, that's what they're doing. And kind of back to what you were saying of everybody's really good at something. And some of these guys don't have to be good at everything, but I think everyone's trying to be good at everything right now.
Oh, you can tell. I mean, as I mentioned, everyone's upped their game. I'll admit that everyone has upped their game in the media, and they're doing a great job there. You see a lot of these reporters that maybe aren't X's and O's guys or assignment-driven guys. they're learning. They're throwing out, I forget which reporter threw out the other day. It was a video of a deuce block. And I was like, wow, that's awesome, because I don't know if he's ever used that before because I haven't followed him that long, but I give credit to guys that are trying to learn because I learn on a daily basis. And my expertise is more of the X's and O's, but if they're doing it too, that makes everyone better. That makes everybody in the media and the fans better. And when it comes to, one thing I did notice, so this is my first year where I went down to the Senior Bowl in Mobile. We took a couple of the guys down there, went down there, scouted a bunch of those guys for the draft, and got my feet wet because that's the first real trip that I took as, quasi media or whatever. So I learned a few things down there. I didn't cover as much because I was trying to get my bearings there. And so when I went to camp this time, I had a little better plan on how to cover things. And, one thing I did notice that, from the Senior Bowl till camp was that you see a lot of guys, yes, they huddle up together. Certain friends that are, whether they're in the media, broadcasters, scouts, whatever, draft analysts, whatever, you'll see them huddle together, and that's fine, that's normal. But a lot of them, it's a group thing. They, one thing will say, one guy will say something, and then guess what? The narrative has started. And that's something that, when these practices are closed, or maybe I don't see a game, I get to the game late, see the game late, and all these narratives are coming out, I pump the brakes because I want to see it myself. And so some of these guys, again, you mentioned it, it's not their forte, and that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. And, but don't go with the group thing. Cause then you guys saw, if you guys follow us, I had a pretty much, polar opposite opinion on Josh Allen's first day of practice. And I stood by that. And honestly, I didn't know what others were even saying until after practice. And when I got back to my hotel room, boy, did I have some notifications, and they weren't good. So it's not that just these guys are, the media are under the group think when they're at these practices, and maybe they don't know what they're seeing. So they're just going to go along with what someone else said out loud, and they run with it and they make that a story. But I think as fans, we become conditioned to also believe that stuff. So when someone does say something opposite of the masses, well, guess what? We're going to troll them. We're going to give them a hard time. That's one thing I did learn from covering camp, and I think that's a valuable tool to have.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think Chip, I think it's Clifford here in the chat room. I think it's Chip from our
he's a premium member.
Yeah, premium Slack channel, talks about there's a generational gap showing. I do agree with him that I don't always just want to see breakdowns, right? I go to Cover One to see breakdowns. I go to certain people to see breakdowns. I do want the other stuff. I want the articles by Tim Graham. I want the articles by Fairburn. I want that anecdotal side of the game. I want it all. And so that's why I want some of these guys that are trying to do things. I agree with you. Trying to learn and put out better content's great. But some guys, if you just stick to the things that you're good at and give me that content, I'm going to keep coming back to you. And so I agree with you there on that, Chip. And one thing I have to say about you, Erik, I know for a fact that you've reached out and talked to some reporters before about teaching them, saying, hey, man, I'll go through this stuff and teach you if you want it. And not everyone takes you up on that, and not everybody's interested in that, but
not one
you are
person.
willing.
Not one person has. And that's why the other day, or day off yesterday, I put out a video, and all I did was I sat here, I put on some film, and I broke the film down as if I was, doing it for the first time. It's the first time I saw this film. So I put it on, started breaking it down, and I was just talking out loud. And that's for our premium members. If you check it out at the site, that's something that's the process of me breaking down film, and you can learn from, just things like that. And so if you guys are premium members, I hope you guys take advantage of that, because if you're trying to learn, which if you're following us, you kind of are, and definitely get to our YouTube channel and look at that, because those moments are where you're going to get the value from Cover One and all of our contributors. And so, yeah, I mean, I've reached out to people that, to show them how to break down film, because again, I think it makes everyone better. It makes everyone better.
Yeah, no doubt. I keep coming back to it. I think it's the way of the future. So let's get into a little bit what makes Cover One here, and get away from that side of the story. Let's get into, so we didn't get a lot from camp today, but we did hear a report somebody brought to attention in the Slack room somewhere that we started to see some of the big nickel. I think there's a little bit of confusion among fans about what big nickel is. I think maybe even in some of the reporting, there's a little bit of confusion about what it is. Some of that's totally understandable because I've had some confusion in discussions with people before about what exactly classifies that big nickel versus just bringing in an extra safety or another defensive back, because there's a little bit of gray area there. Can you try to help me and all of us really learn, because we know that McDermott wants to install this. We know that he wants to have some of that in the team. I don't know if he's got the personnel for it right yet for the big nickel. So that's why I was surprised to hear about it today, especially hearing that it was Raphael Bush as the big nickel. That was a little bit shocking. So can you kind of, what should we be looking for when that package gets installed? And what are we seeing that maybe we're confusing as big nickel?
Well, I just want to keep it simple. All right. For 2016 and 2017, McDermott, when he was with the Panthers and obviously with the Bills, to them, big nickel was keeping who? Shaq Thompson on the field. Shaq Thompson's a linebacker. He's in the 230 range. That meant that they were keeping their three linebackers, their base defense on the field at all times. Whether it be 3rd and 7 or 3rd and 6 and long, that's what they were doing. They were keeping him on. That was their version of big nickel. I think they had a different name for it. I think Fairburn researched it and said they called it Husky because Shaq Thompson was a Husky, a linebacker with the Washington Huskies. That I don't know the specifics about, but Fairburn had mentioned that was the personnel grouping name. Now we heard, I think Joe B actually came out and said it today that the big nickel made an appearance today at practice during that closed session. And again, when we go back to why they close these practices, a lot of it has to do with the fear and paranoia of stealing. But a lot of times, certain installs are happening. And when you hear about today and what was today, you hear about a lot of red zone work,
A lot of red zone
on both sides of the ball. And this personnel alignment, it was something in the last 2 years under McDermott, whatever team he was with, the Bills and the Panthers ran 0 dime looks. And that third safety with Raphael Bush, a lot of times is going to be, depending on what they do with the linebackers, is going to be, a semi-dime look. So if Bush is in the slot in the red zone, to me, that screams a 3 safety look. To me, that doesn't. Again, this is maybe semantic. This is a cool conversation we had in our Slack channel too, Aaron, because it could be semantics, but to me, when I think of big nickel, I think of the defense keeping in their linebacker on passing situations. So it's just the opposite, because it's something the Bills did last year, a ton of. And last year in 2017, according to Sports Info Solutions, the Bills on 3rd and 4+ yardage plays on defense, they were in their base defense. So they had all 3 linebackers, 7.5% of the snaps. The average was 1.89%. So that was telling me that from 3rd and medium and beyond, 3rd and 7 and beyond, the Bills played a lot of base defense. And so that's surprising to me. When you
especially
look
with how unathletic they were
with the linebackers, that third linebacker. I mean, we love Zoe, but he was also moved around in a lot of passing situations. So how you maneuver that personnel is one thing, but to see them in their base personnel that much was kind of surprising, but kind of wasn't too, right, Aaron? Because you think about Poyer and Hyde, those guys can cover anyone in a slot. So
yeah, no doubt. And they weren't super deep at the cornerback position, so that's going to really dictate a lot of what you're able to do as far as putting out personnel packages, right? They're a little bit deeper this year.
Totally. And then if you flash back to McDermott, when he was the defensive coordinator with the Panthers in 2016, they were in base 6.3% of the time. So that means they had the 3 linebackers in that often, and the average then was 1.16. So I think the semantics maybe of 3 safety versus big nickel is kind of becoming blurred. I think that's the way the league is going with how teams want to defend spread concepts. But I think the ultimate sentiment when it comes to whether it's third safety coming in or leaving that linebacker in, it's done for a reason, right, Aaron? Yeah. And I think from what we've heard today, when Bush came in, he played in that slot corner role. To me, that screams 3 safety, 3 safety look, and that screams, basically them trying to match up a guy that is a pretty good tackler that's usually playing around the box in that red zone. So it's that quasi big nickel role. I understand what Joe B was trying to say there, but I'm not sure if I would classify it as that when Raphael Bush is 5'11", 200 pounds, when Shaq Thompson was 6 foot, probably 230 or something like that. So I think the semantics about that and is kind of blurred now, but I think that was interesting that they decided to break that out when media was only the media was present. So obviously there's no filming or anything like that, because you would spot that immediately. I would, at least, if I'm sitting at practice watching that. And it's just something that, keep an eye on, because I think you're right, Aaron. Of course, that's not something they've ever really done. They don't really play 3 safety looks. So that'll be interesting to watch from here on out.
Yeah, you were talking about that. I listened to Peter King's interview on the One Bills Live today too, and he was talking about a little bit. He was listening to Dable teaching today and talking about that. And I think you're right that today was a big time install day. Dable. You have to go back and listen to that interview because he was saying, Dable was talking to McCarron, Allen, and Peterman and switching up plays on the fly and saying, oh, this isn't working. We're going to have Clay do this instead and stuff like that. So there was a lot of different stuff that they were working through today that they probably didn't want everybody seeing. And I agree with that. But to get back to this big nickel thing. So if we are watching games, because I think some of this stuff's going to really come more later in the season as players develop here. I think we will see some of the 3 safety looks. You brought up a great point in the Slack channel about, the Patriots run a lot of that 3 safety look. They don't call Patrick Chung a big nickel guy, when they bring in people like that. So, but what are we going to look for? Who are the guys on this Bills roster? I know we've talked about Sierra Neal when we discussed defensive backs as the ideal fit for that down the road. I don't think he's going to be there this year. Obviously, his development, we haven't even heard his name yet so far in training camp. So his development's probably not as long as they would want it to put him in there. Who on this Bills roster are we going to see fill that role? And when we see them get in, we can know, oh, okay, there's that big nickel base package that they're trying to run.
Well, listen, and I said the end goal of this type of matchup, this type of personnel matching, is to combat 12 personnel, 1 running back, 2 tight ends, 13 personnel, which obviously you watched the Eagles last year. That was one of their base sets. They ran a lot of 13 personnel. You're getting these big tight ends on the field and condensed formations, and then you're running them down the field, guys that can run, the Trey Burtons of the world and Selleck's and whatnot. So I think that trend on the offensive side of the ball is forcing defenses to adjust. They're trying to stay ahead of the curve. And so a guy like Sierra Neal, who's played corner, safety, linebacker, and he's got a nose for the ball, can hit, can light people up, can play off the edge, can feel against a run. He's a guy that has a skill set that does translate into that role. But I mean, when we're talking big nickel, again, he's 6 foot 206. So he's not quite the Shaq Thompson of the world, Sure. So I think he is an obvious fit for that role eventually. I don't think he's there yet. And honestly, at camp, have we even really heard his name called? And then the other guy they brought over from Carolina, who obviously would have an idea on what it takes to play that role, or in playing the defense altogether, is Dean Marlowe. And that's a guy those are 2 guys that Fairburn have mentioned to me in regards to that we're lining up or being groomed for that role. And I mean, it goes back to prior to the right before the draft and even after the draft when they did take Neal in the draft, right, Aaron? Where is he going to fit? Who worked him out? I mean, who worked him out, Aaron? I mean, Babich. That's a linebackers coach.
Yeah, no, it's true. And we talked about it a little bit before the show starts. I think McDermott's a very patient guy. You see it in his press conferences. You see it in his demeanor. And if he doesn't have the personnel, he's not going to force the issue. I think they would like to get that installed. I think they would like to have that guy. But we saw it last year with Preston Brown and Humber and these guys that, this is the personnel that I have. And, I would like to do some things, but I'm not going to force people into positions that they're not comfortable playing in. So maybe we're seeing a little bit more of the 3 safety look because he figures, these guys that maybe fit that big nickel aren't quite developed yet to where I want them to be. I can't trust them on the field, but I can counter some of what offenses are doing by bringing in an additional safety. So we'll scrap the big nickel for now and bring in this extra safety.
And to wrap up the big nickel talk, because I think it's a great conversation and there's a lot of blurred area, gray area to the conversation. I mean, who do we play week 1, Aaron?
Yeah,
I mean, we play a team that likes to use their tight ends. You look at the Ravens depth chart right now. Nick Boyle, Max Williams,
Flacco's going to go to him,
Hayden Hurst, and Mark Andrews. That's 4 pretty good tight ends. So you better have some type of personnel or some guys that can play the role where they can match up with the guy down the field, are physical enough to stay with the tight end, along with obviously Poyer and Hyde, but guys that also can, fill versus the run and can maybe stack and shed or just stick their nose head into the gap and to have the play bounce outside when they go to 2 and 3 tight end sets. So I think it's just a great job by the staff of, obviously installing this. And maybe that's why they closed it to the media today, because maybe they're starting to put in little pieces for later on, building that game plan for week 1, because that's something that teams do. I don't know how early they started, but maybe they are building towards that first game.
It could be for that first game, or I mean, like you said, man, that is just the way the league is heading. A lot of teams are going to try to copy what the Eagles did. A lot of teams try to copy what the Patriots do. We got to play the Patriots twice, so you need some exotic looks to, you're going to have to throw a bunch of different guys at Gronk. You're not going to just be able to throw one look at Gronk the whole day. So it'll be interesting to see how it develops throughout the rest of training camp. See if they show us any of these looks. Because there's going to be a lot more open practices. We are going to see some red zone work in practices. They can't avoid it. So it'll be interesting to see if we get a chance to get our eyes on some of these looks. And then I want your opinion maybe a little bit further once we get our eyes on these looks of what they're really doing. Because like you said, we really don't know without seeing. We're all just kind of taking shots in the dark here, guessing at what's going on. But I like that they're throwing these looks out because the Bills have maybe the two most versatile safeties that I can think of in the NFL. I mean, you have Hyde, who played a ton of slot cornerback and then came back and played safety full time for the first time in his career and makes it to a Pro Bowl playing safety full time. But that he can really play anywhere on the field. I mean, that is such a versatile Swiss Army knife defensive back that I think it's going to give Frazier and McDermott a lot of versatility in what they want to do with those defensive backs. Again, it comes back to my issue here is I don't know, we say a lot of it depends on your depth at the defensive backfield, but I just don't see the depth here right now. And so that worries me too. You could throw out 5-6 more guys. I still think there's some concerns. Like, I don't know how good of a player Raphael Bush is. I don't know if I want to see him covering Gronk in the red zone. That doesn't, I don't know. That doesn't do anything for me, man.
Off the top of my head, without seeing what how they were using him, if especially again, he's like 5'11", you know what I mean? So he's not big. He could be just that pesty little defender that gets in Gronk's face, and then they can have Hyde and Poyer free to roam, to rob, to confuse Brady. Again, I'm just speaking out of my butt here, but those are just things that maybe they're just trying it out. Maybe they're just trying out. Could be anything, guys.
See how it looks. All right. So we didn't have a ton of questions here from the chat rooms today. And I think we covered the questions that we got in the Slack room because a lot of the conversation came around this big nickel conversation today. So that's another great thing. If you haven't joined the premium yet, get in there because the conversations, like we said earlier, just are real great conversations. And we're picking each other's brains and trying to figure out, what are the Bills doing? What's the team going to look like? Things like that. We do have one question here. Looks like they were talking about McLeod or Kalen Clay. I don't know if there was another conversation going on, but that came up in the Slack channel today. I know Tyler was thinking they keep at least one speed guy.
I mean,
do you think Kalen Clay has any shot at being that speed guy? I just don't.
I'll tell you what, man. I think he's had a great camp. I really do. I think he's had a great camp. I don't think he's the gadget guy that McLeod is. Again, McLeod's a guy I wanted to watch. He was one of my 3 top players to watch going into camp. He's a former running back who set records. He's nasty with the ball in his hand. He can make guys miss. He can drop his hips and cut on a dime. So I think they do like him. Obviously, they drafted him, but they do like him in the role of jet sweeps, pop passes. Just any gadget play like that. And then you're going to see him run those pivot routes. They're running a ton of those pivot routes with him. And they're lighting him up wide, stacking him, working underneath stuff. I think he's very raw, but I do think that, he and Clay are going at it for a similar position, I believe. And I do expect McLeod to pull it off in the end, just because he offers the same versatility and special teams, and honestly he's a better returner than Clay is. Clay was on like kick returns, he was the up back, so he wasn't even fielding those returns, whereas McLeod was working as up back and as a returner. So it'll be interesting to see between those two. I think they both have had decent camps. I mean, Clay, he's fast, man. He's really fast. So I just see McLeod as a gadget guy.
Yeah, I think Clay's biggest issue. Well, one, I mean, I keep forgetting that he's on the roster, to be quite honest with you. I know he was here last year, and when I'm talking about wide receivers, I'm not even mentioning him because I think he's just gonna have a tough time because I think a little bit he's a one-trick pony for them with just speed. And while they definitely need speed at the position, I think they have a few guys, like you said, with a McLeod, a couple other guys that can just do a little bit more. And we keep talking about if you're going to be one of those, whatever it is, 4 through 7, 4 through 6 wide receivers, you need to bring a little bit more than one trick to the table because the roster spots are so limited. And Tyler asks, what are the max number of wide receivers the Bills can keep? I think it's going to be really interesting how that plays out. We've talked about that.
Man.
It's a total crapshoot, and it really depends on how other positions shake out. They got a lot of running backs right now in camp. If some of these guys step up, obviously Shady's 30. That's got to be at the back of your mind. Ivory's also 30. Plus, you have two guys that are competing for special team spots in Tywan Jones and Cadet. So there's a lot of competitions there. If they keep 4 running backs, that's going to affect what they're able to keep at wide receiver. Same with defensive line. We know that they want a big, healthy rotation on the defensive line. If they keep one extra guy there, that's going to impact the position somewhere else. I think the magic number 6, and then maybe stash.
Number, yeah,
I think stash somebody on the practice squad that you like. I think one of the problems is going to be some of these guys they think might be able to be on the practice squad might not make it to other teams' practice squads. People are talking about how bad the Bills' depth chart is, but this is a challenge to a lot of the people in this watching this right now, and I'll challenge the Slack channel too. Go look at other teams' wide receiver depth charts, man. It's after you get past 2, obviously the Bills don't have big names up front, but once you get past the 2 to 3 guys, there aren't a lot of guys out there. So teams are going to be plucking whatever talent they can when cuts come around all over the league.
Yeah, and it's a passing league, so every team has an abundance of receivers in camp, and it's just finding the right guy, the guy that can fill a role in Daboll's offense. And I think when you look historically at the offense that the Patriots have run, there were a few years where they had some big names, but a lot of times they just developed these guys. Yeah. So they didn't really have a lot of big names besides the Randy Mosses and whatnot. I mean, the Welker, they made a trade for him. Edelman, they drafted him and groomed him. So this system isn't totally reliant on star wide receivers. They look for a certain, trait or a certain role that each guy can play, and then they put him in that position to excel. I mean, that's something that, Belichick learned from Bill Parcells is they draft certain paradigms, certain guys for certain positions. And I think Daboll is playing it in this very same way. I got to find a gadget guy. I got to find a big wide receiver that I can use in the slot. He's filling each role and then doing what he can to put those guys in the best position. And I think that across the league, people that aren't really watching this team or seeing how this team is being built, especially under Daboll in this new system, I don't think they're putting it all together. And I can't blame them. I mean, it's hard to cover every single team. So when you get those guys that do fantasy numbers and advanced stats and all that, they don't really know. And they're just, throwing shade at the Bills. I mean, yeah, you're going to take offense to it, but let's be honest here. It's too hard to cover every single team. And honestly, we talk about crapshoots. I mean, you're gonna judge a team's roster by crunching some numbers
in the previous year and all that. Yeah, I got a lot of issues with that I could do an entire show about my issues with fantasy guys trying to predict things. So you can head over to my Twitter if you want to see some of my takes on that. But Magic Catfish says we have the worst wide receiver situation in the league. Maybe the Ravens have a worse one. I would say Indy definitely has a worse situation. I think there's probably a couple other teams. I don't think ours is as bad. I keep saying this. I keep going back to it. I don't think it's as bad as fans maybe think it is. Obviously, the quarterback play is not going to drive that up, but Kelvin Benjamin is a lot better receiver, I think, than people realize. I think some of the injuries that have kept him back, Carolina's
injuries, how they used him. I mean, honestly, look at the way Daboll's using him. I mean, I have never seen
attacking him today.
Yeah, I mean, I've never seen the Panthers, even us last year, use him in the slot like a quasi tight end, which is brilliant. I mean, it's really brilliant. I don't think teams put him in the proper position when he was with the Panthers. I mean, they went out and drafted Funchess, and those are two similar players. Well, Benjamin was a first round pick. They want to get the ball to him. They're trying to funnel the offense through him. Obviously, it didn't work. So
yeah, and his last year after the injury to Carolina had some issues. I know some friends of mine that are fans down there. They had a bad offensive line. They had no running game to speak of. Their offense also struggled. They had issues. Obviously, we saw that Bills game against Carolina. That thing was just ugly offensively. Obviously, two defenses were pretty good, but I don't know. I think Benjamin's a lot better than us fans think he is. I think he can be a good number one wide receiver. He's not your traditional legitimate number wide receiver that's going to burn a guy down the field or anything like that. But I think he can be a guy that they say, hey, we're going to target this guy. You saw it today. He's going up against Trey White and Vontae Davis, and they're just going after two really good cornerbacks and just saying, we're going to challenge you with our number one receiver.
That's
We haven't had that.
Yeah, and what's great about that is our defense is so stacked now, and they've built, the defensive line, rebuilt the defensive line a little bit. Obviously, the linebackers and the whole defense has been rebuilt. Let's just say that, and they are on paper looking good, and at practice they've looked really good too. So what does that do to your offense? Well, guess what? You're practicing against that defense every day. You're in a new scheme, and you're going out there and scoring 2 touchdowns with Kelvin Benjamin, high pointing against Trey White. Like, you're elevating everyone else's game.
Iron sharpens iron, man.
Yeah, if your defense is really good, well, guess what? That's just only going to help your offense and help them up their game. So I think that's a great problem to have. And when it comes to judging the roster, and I know there's a few guys in the chat room saying how bad our wide receiver situation is. You know what? That's fine. Everyone said the same thing about our team last year, and I don't think you can measure. You can't put coaching on a stat sheet. You can't. All right. And I think that's what this organization and this staff has proved. You can't put a number on coaching and teaching. And they did wonders with the team last year with the bad roster last year. So I'm sorry, I'm not going to count them out. In any given Sunday, as they say, anything can happen. And I'm not counting this roster out, especially if they can build upon the team that they built last year, because that was a team, period. There were no individuals. That was a team.
And that is what they're building here. And everybody that comes into contact with the coaching staff and everybody says the same thing. They're building a, very starless team that is built on coaching. And I'm glad that you brought that up, because it kind of goes into what you were saying with, how do you put some things into analytics? And analytics doesn't cover everything. Obviously, we're big fans of analytics over here at Cover One.
Use them every day.
Yeah, use them every day. We're always talking about them. Definitely love them. I don't want to smash on analytics, but some things you cannot put into analytics. Some things have too many variables to associate analytics to. And one of those things, like you said, is coaching. So I got really upset recently when they, I think it was Mike Clay at ESPN, came out again against the Bills.
Your
and
boy.
my point, my buddy, my point though is, like, how do you, what type of curve do you implement for losing Rick Dennison and gaining Dable, who's a teacher, a guy that's going to teach these guys and put them in different positions? That curve is an unpredictable thing that you cannot associate a number to.
Oh my goodness. And that was one of the things that got me so excited about watching this team the first couple of days of camp, because Dable is the one out there screaming at guys when they screw up their assignments, and he's not just working with the quarterbacks. You see him telling details to the receivers and their routes and the depth of their routes, how they should be pivoting, changing their, their weight when they're making cuts to the boundary. Every little detail having to do with this offense. Tight end splits. You saw a video I posted of him, talking to Clay before the play ran at the line of scrimmage, telling him he's got to tighten his split up a little more. Like, the minutia that Dable is paying attention to. It pays off in the end. It pays off because, guys are obviously learning. And I just think that you can't put a stat on coaching and teaching. And I don't know Dennison. I don't know Rico. Obviously, it didn't work out with him with us. And, he went over to the Jets, and that's fine.
Sure.
But I just know that Dable is a teacher. And that is something that when McDermott was hired, that's the kind of staff he wanted to put together. So I'm not saying Dennison wasn't, but I see it with my own eyes that Dable is a teacher, and I love it.
And he comes from two teachers, whether you like him or not. Bill Belichick's one of the best, greatest teachers in NFL history. He's a student of the game himself. He is a teacher. And Saban, one of the greatest college coaches in all of football. Again, a guy that is a teacher, who's a hands-on guy. He wants to teach you how to play football, and that's where Dable's coming from. So he's going to be hands-on. Peter Gang talked about it, like I said today, that he's out there teaching these guys. And again, I just don't think you can put a curve on that. Another thing to address on these wide receivers too, I do think that Jeremy Curley is another guy that I think is better than fans think. I think he got a little bit lost in San Francisco last year. Just Shanahan's a super good offensive coordinator and just got a bunch of guys open. I think he got lost in the shuffle a little bit there. Doesn't mean he's not good and still not a productive wide receiver, or can be a productive wide receiver. You put the article about his catch radius. I think that's going to be beautiful, especially if we end up with a guy like Allen starting. You need a guy like that. He just seems to be one of these crafty vets that seems to find the openings, knows how to, see what the defense is giving him and take that. Can you talk to us about, maybe Curley is a little bit better than people think? What do you think on that?
I love the Curley signing. Obviously, if you go to cover1.net, I did a really big breakdown on him, lots of film, lots of advanced stats, and you can see some of his stats on the screen right now. And you know what? The stats, honestly, probably don't even do him justice. All right. Because when he was in San Francisco, he was with Cap and those guys, look, 2016, he had 108 targets, 64 receptions, 667 yards, 3 touchdowns. I mean, yes, you can look at his production, but to me, what I see when he's running his routes, he's a savvy route runner. He knows how to set up defenders. All right. That right there it's going to go a long way. Why? Because he's teaching a lot of these young receivers. We have a young receiving group. All right. And so how to be a pro's pro? Well, guess what? They're going to learn from Curly. I mean, you watch him, he's all business out there. You see some of the younger guys dancing around when the music's on. Curly's all business, man. And he's made some really nice plays across the middle of the field when the quarterbacks extended the play. He found voids in those zones, and that's what he's so good at. His mental processing of coverages and how defenses are trying to stop these receivers in this passing game is going to do wonders when you have a 3rd and 4, when you have a 3rd and 6, and you need a first down, and you need a guy that's going to make a tough catch on the back hip from a pass from an inaccurate quarterback. He's that guy. And his boundary awareness when he needs to make a catch along the sideline, get 2 feet in, toe tap, that toe drag swag. He's that guy. And I think everything he brings as a wide receiver and as an NFL pro, having been in the league for many years now, I think it's just going to make everyone around him better, especially in that wide receiver room.
I'm glad you brought that point up because I'm a big believer that every room needs that kind of guy. And I think we didn't have that last year. Obviously, Benjamin gets traded for, but I don't know that he's even that kind of guy. I think every room, though, needs, when we're breaking down film, and you obviously have your coaches, and your coaches are teachers, but there's something different. And we got McCarron in there this year, but there's in the quarterback room. But I think it's a different idea when there's another player there that's also teaching you and then the coaches. Would you agree with that there's just a difference between coaches teaching you and players helping you?
Oh, there's totally a different dynamic. And again, it's one of those things. I know even the coach there, Robisky, he's a wily vet too. He's been around the league a long time. And it just kind of jogged my memory when we're talking about him as a coach. He's a guy that for many years was more of a vertical passer. So I don't know what that says about the quarterback situation. Anyways, I do think that there's a different dynamic when it comes to, getting the information being taught from a player, a pro, because your guard's down. You're not as nervous. You're not as uptight.
Willing to ask questions.
You're willing to ask questions. You're more comfortable. You're not walking on eggshells. And because these are guys that are teaching younger kids how to play the position. They are guys that have been through it, obviously. So they want to pass on that wisdom. And Curly's that point in his career. I think he came in 2011. Mm-hmm. He's at that point in his career where he's comfortable with that role. And I'm sure that's something that Bean and this organization talked to him about when they brought him on, because they had to, because there wasn't much on this roster.
No.
Especially, once the whole, Zay Jones thing happened, and I don't know where that is, and I don't want to get into it quite yet because we don't know, but there's a lot of questions when it comes to the receiver position, which is why we drafted a couple and why we are, every day in the Slack channel, our boy Tyler's bringing this up. So it's something that we're going to be dealing with on a daily basis and talking about. And Jay Robin Hood asked a shout out to everyone that's trying to make the 53, because right now there's 90 or so on the roster, and it's competition. And so you can look at the receiving group and be like, they look sad on paper, but when you have guys like Jeremy Curley, you have guys like even Andre Holmes, you have guys like Kelvin Benjamin that they come out and bring the best in guys around them and are trying to pass on information, what they learn. You can't put a price on that. You can't put a number on that. There's no production. There's no way to value that. So, I love Curly. I like the sign. I think he's going to have a pretty good year this year.
Yeah, and let's be honest too. It's the NFL. This is the best of the best in the whole world that as far as athletes go, football players. And so maybe you don't know the guy. Last year, the Poyer signing didn't do a whole lot for me. I didn't really know Jordan Poyer. This year, I know exactly who Jordan Poyer is. Sometimes it's getting a guy in the right position and him just being motivated to prove everyone. Because all these guys, as far as athletes go, they're pretty much close, right? Like there's a lot of close athletes. It's a matter of who's out there to really prove it and who's going to step up. And I think the Bills might have a couple of those guys on the roster that can really prove a lot of fans wrong. but so much goes into the success of players is other players around you. So, there might be good wide receivers on this team and maybe the quarterback plays down or vice versa. We don't know yet. So that's something that's going to shake itself out here at camp. And I'm just excited to see it, but I don't think it's as bad as fans think. And I think there's still some time to make changes if the coaches think it's bad. I think guys are going to shake off rosters. We're going to be losing some guys here. Cuts start to happen and things will change. There's plenty of time between. I know it feels like next game, the first game of the season is coming right up, but there's quite a bit of time still to get this roster ready for the 53.
No doubt about it, man.
We got any other questions in here?
Yeah, send them in, guys.
Yeah, send them in. If not, while people, we'll see if any questions come in. What do you guys got? Do you know if anybody else has got content coming out? What do you got coming out for content this week?
Well, if you guys have just getting home from work, or maybe you're on your way home from work, I did drop an article on Josh Allen, and because it's funny when you watch, look at Twitter and you look at social media, everyone wants to put him down. And, I'm on record. I had a 2nd round grade on him. I didn't want him with our pick. I would have preferred Josh Rosen, but that's all behind me now. And so I evaluated him coming in. I didn't think they should have taken him. I had a 2nd round grade on him. If you want to look at my report, it's all out there on cover1.net. I'm transparent about that. My job is not on the line with this. So I don't care. I give you my opinion, take it for what it is. But I think a lot of analysts across the country are they're knocking him, and you see one bad pass and that goes viral. You see, a really good read by him and delivery. You don't see that retweeted as much. And so I found one play and it just shows some of his development. It was a snag spot concept that they ran on day 3. And it was the interception by Ryan Carter. If you guys haven't seen it, definitely go to our day 3 recap, because Nate and I had an awesome film session, broke this play down. There was some good and bad in it, but this play was an interception on a concept known as a spot snag. Long story short, the next day, the Bills ran it again. Similar situation, just a 3rd and long instead of a 3rd and medium, where Allen on the first day and day 3 could have hit the underneath, could have had a first down. He didn't. He had played hero ball. He was confident, threw an interception. Well, on day 4, he learned from it. They ran the same concept. Defense showed him zone coverage this time. He did a really great job of baiting Trey White to the flat. So he pointed his shoulder, was looking at Malachi Dupree, got Trey White to jump it, and he was able to get Clay behind Trey White in that deep 3rd area that Trey was supposed to be responsible for. So it's just it's a set of plays where you get to see his progress, because all you're going to hear is negative stuff. But I want to point out that there is good happening. Whether he starts or not, doesn't even matter. But I want to see development. I want to see him do little things to be a quarterback eventually in this league, whenever that is. And that series of plays really stood out to me, because it shows that he's developing. It shows that he's learning and he's taking coaching, which is something that this staff had mentioned about him. You think it's just coach speak. It's not. There's, a lot of this is truth. And so if you're a subscriber to The Athletic, get to the Buffalo part of the site and look at that. It's a bunch of stills and you'll be able to read through it, because I think it was a good learning point for him and for fans to see. So it's a good article.
Here's a couple questions for you, Cam. And I do agree. I got a chance to check that one out. It's a great article, and definitely go check that out. We got with the addition of Starr, Murphy, Phillips, do you see any changes to the defensive scheme? And then he adds and Edmonds. This is Mike Stock. Do you see any changes to the defensive scheme with any of those newer additions?
No. I think that teams are going to be faced with a problem. I think if you look at some early film of Starr and Harrison Phillips, and just if you know those guys, it's going to be a lot more difficult to run the ball up the middle. And then you have Kyle Williams, who's the ultimate disruptor, jumping counts, and always the first off the ball. Obviously, we have a couple DNs that are some pretty good run stoppers too, and not just the first wave, but the second wave. So with that said, when you have those bulkier players up the middle now to occupy and keep your linebackers like Matt Milano and Tremaine Edmonds free, something I mentioned in our film chat on the Slack channel is I noticed that they're playing their linebackers what appears to be maybe 3 yards off the ball, off the line of scrimmage. Normally, especially like last year with Preston Brown, and obviously he's not the same athlete as these two guys. They typically are at like a 4.5 to 5 yard cushion off the line of scrimmage. These guys are really close, and why can they do that? Because they have guys up front that can, occupy people. But
Mhm.
these linebackers this year are so much more athletic, and they can move quicker in space. They, have better lateral agility, so they can scrape quicker, and they can get downhill quicker. They have a nose for the ball. So I think that's something to keep an eye on when it comes to that. So
Yeah.
I don't think per se overall that personnel or scheme wise that anything's going to change, but I think it does open up some things when it comes to the D line.
Yeah, and I think it's going to give them. I agree with you. I don't think it'll change the scheme. I think what it's going to do is give them the opportunity to do what they wanted to do
Freedom.
all along,
Yeah.
which they couldn't do with Preston Brown as a non-athletic. He adds Edmonds in there with a non-athletic linebacker. I think Edmonds gives them a little more versatility to open up the playbook a little bit more. But as far as the scheme itself, I think McDermott is who he is. And I think he's gonna, he and Leslie Frazier have an idea of what they want that scheme to look like, and they're going to get the guys that fit that. They're not going to. I don't think those guys change that at all. Then
No,
we
I
get
asked, I asked players.
yeah.
I said, hey, especially when it came to the back end coverage, I asked Poyer. I'm like, hey, so what should I be studying this year? Because I don't ask him outright. Like
Yeah.
I want to learn. I want to learn in the off season. And he said, man, nothing's changing. We had success with how we played, and we didn't really have the pass rush. Just
Yeah.
imagine now that we have some beef up the middle. We have linebackers that can
An
run
athletic linebacker, yeah.
yeah, it's gonna be fun to watch, man. I mean,
Yeah.
I know we haven't really talked about it too much here on the podcast and even in the media altogether, but I think it's because the defense is. I think the expectations are set, and I think that
A lot
there's
less questions.
a lot less questions on that side of the ball, and offense is always sexier when it comes down to it, right?
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. Everybody. Hey, you got to score points to win.
Yes.
Last question here by our buddy Tyler. Let me see where it is. This is more of a fun question. Tyler likes to have some fun with us. So, what Bills jersey are you both looking to get next? I've gotten burned on some Bills jerseys, man. I got a pile of them just sitting in the back of my closet that are almost unwearable now. Jumped the gun too soon on some guys. So if you're gonna go buy a new Bills jersey, who you thinking?
Oh man, I've pretty much gotten to the point where yes, I've been burned several times now. I'm looking to my right, and I look up on the wall, and I have a Lynch jersey. I have a Stevie Johnson jersey, which I do appreciate that one. Then an old school Willis McGahee jersey, and my two jerseys I just bought recently from Jim Ruther was a Jim Kelly, that black jersey. It's sick, black and red, and then another Andre Reed jersey with some stats on it. So I'm in that mode where I'm going to go old school just because I don't want to get burned. But I mean, having talked and had relationships and friendships with some of the guys on the team, of course, I'd like to support them. So I'd have to go with my boys, Poyer, Zoe. I think those guys mean a lot to this organization, and I think they're going to help turn around this franchise and at least set us up for the future.
Yeah. I keep teasing my wife that I'm going to buy a Josh Allen jersey just because I got the EJ one. And I was all pumped up about that, and now it's buried in the back of the closet. Yeah, no, so I'm not gonna do the Josh Allen one. I've been thinking about a Hyde or a Poyer. I think those two guys are very impressive guys, and they're fun to watch. I think a Trey White jersey maybe in my future, possibly. And then I like the idea of a Tremaine Edmonds, man. I had a Paul Pasloonzi jersey, and that's the only linebacker I ever had. So, I'd like to see Edmonds come along a little bit. But any of those young guys on defense that we've got pretty much locked up, I'd get. And obviously Kyle Williams. Yeah. That's one that I've discussed maybe getting for years. And I think that's one of those jerseys that's a lock for the rest of your life. You wear a Kyle Williams jersey, man, you got it for the rest of your life. That's never expiring, no matter what.
No doubt about it. And I wouldn't get a Josh Allen just because my personality. I don't want to wear that to a bar, and I'm just going to be heckled the whole time when I'm trying to watch a game. You know what I mean? So I would avoid that personally. I would avoid that because I just don't want to deal with all the riffraff that's going to come with it.
I want to get it. Just kind of the troll in me, the hater in me wants to get it and to kind of bring that attention on myself.
Totally. I mean, and I think Nate brought this up the other day. Like he's, constantly defending Josh Allen now that he's become apologist. I think that's kind of how, he's one of us now. So I think that we are always defending him, and we've become almost apologists because obviously if you're a fan of the Bills, they drafted this guy, you want him to do well, right? So I think we've all, in a sense, become apologists, but I just don't want to deal with the riffraff at the bars or whatever, man.
Nah, we can't escape this one question. We'll end on this here because we can't escape it almost any time we're talking right now. And I think it's going to be this way the entire summer. We got smash physical. We're a week into camp. Choose a starting quarterback based on performance so far. I know you don't want to, but if you're feeder to the fire, who are you as a coach, as an OC? Who are you rolling with week one?
Okay, I'll approach it from a different perspective. If I'm a coach, I'm not throwing Allen out there right away. I'm probably running with McCarron. I'm looking at the schedule. I'm looking at the totality of the offense and how they are trying to build that offense. I don't think they're ready quite yet. I do, from a coaching perspective, I would throw McCarron out there. But as a fan, from what I've seen, how they're trying to build this offense is built for Josh Allen. There's no doubt about it. The stuff that they did when Allen went on that little run, that streak on day 3, the stuff that they were doing on that day, that was planned, guys, for a reason. That was, to make him look good. If they are building an offense like that with a ton of RPOs, a ton of, type stuff where they're reading second level linebackers and safeties so that they can push it down the field, this offense, from a fan's perspective, to me, looks more like a Josh Allen offense. And so whether they put that into effect now, and we saw Dable, and he's got skills when it comes to having game plans for specific quarterbacks. When you saw it in the national championship game from the first to second half, I think that this offense in the long run is built for Allen. So if it's close, the question is, if it's close between McCarron and Allen, why would you just throw McCarron out there? So I think it's a fine line.
Yeah, I have to say, I don't want to get into the argument of when to start a rookie quarterback or anything like that. I primarily, and I've been hitting this up in the Slack channel, based on what I think is the best chance for this team to win, regardless of the schedule. I really don't care too much about the schedule because I'm not interested in predicting schedules and things like that. You look at the Chargers right now, and they're getting beat up, and everybody thought that was going to be a terrible game for them. So you look at some of these teams, you just don't know what to expect. So schedule aside, what to do with a rookie quarterback aside, I think the guy that gives them the best chance to win football games is going to be Josh Allen, based on the fact that he seems to be the only guy that really allows them to make big plays. He's mobile, so he can make some plays with his feet. You're going to need a guy like that when your offense may sputter at times. I think guys like McCarron and Nathan Peterman are going to rely on dink-dunk offenses, really consistent offenses, and I just don't think that the talent is there on this team to drive the ball small increments down the field consistently and score touchdowns. I think they're going to have to make big plays to get into the end zone. And Josh Allen is the only guy that I see taking snaps that's a big play, boomer bust kind of guy. And I say roll with Josh Allen if you're trying to win.
That's fair. I mean, it really is fair, and there are many ways to look at this because if it comes to those quarterbacks, are you telling Kyle Williams, I think Allen gives us our best chance to win, but I'm gonna only throw in McCarron? I mean, you can't really do that. So I think there is some really tough questions that need to be answered in the next couple of weeks because if they are going to be running the type of offense that I've seen at camp long term this season. I think that's something that they are going to have to start, obviously changing up. We talked about the 3-man competition. They're going to have to start, whittling that away and start finding their guy, because that offense that they want to run with a young quarterback like Allen, that needs a lot of reps. So I think that is something as time goes on. I know it was only first week of camp. That does need to be figured out here in the next couple of weeks.
Yeah, I think you're going to start to see a little bit of separation across all positions here after this first preseason game, right? We're coming up into the first preseason game next week, I think it is, next Thursday. So after that, I think that we'll have a bit of a more clear understanding of what the team's thinking, and then gives players a chance to go up against some other guys with live bullets and see what they got, because it's really hard to judge at this point. So I think we're going to end it on there because we're going to be back a bunch of times this week. So we don't want to take all your questions and drain all those questions out of you guys. But stay tuned to Cover One because we got a ton of content coming out. We've been dropping podcasts. We do 5-6 of them last week. So if you're looking for more to listen to tonight and you're mad that we went offline, go over and subscribe to the podcast, download all the podcasts. You can go back and listen to them. Like Erik was saying, he and Nate did a good film breakdown. You can go over to our YouTube page, and I encourage you to subscribe to that. When you subscribe to that, click the little bell. It'll notify you when we do go live like this, in case you just don't see it on Twitter that we're going live. It'll send a notification to your phone, let you know, hey, those guys are hopping on live again. And that was a great film session. So go back, check that one out. But definitely follow us on all the social media accounts. Help us out with some reviews and things like that on podcast reviews, YouTube. Spread the word. We're just trying to educate fans, and we're passionate fans ourselves. So just trying to just spread the word about the Bills. And we appreciate all that you guys do for us and coming in and watching and helping us out do this, because we can't do it without you. We really appreciate the fans. And anything else you want to say before we head out of here, Erik?
No, again, just thanks for the support. Thanks for tuning in. It's been a great couple weeks to start this season. We appreciate you following us across all the social media platforms, and get to our site, because again, it's not about just Bills. It's you want to learn some X's and O's. You want commentary. We got a little bit of everything. So get to the site, and heck of a job by Aaron and Nate hosting this podcast the last few months during the difficult time of the year. And so that's why you see, now that the season's here, guys, we're starting to pump out content every day, because we're just as excited as you guys. And, we want to bring you a unique perspective to, an organization, a team that we all love, and that, that is ingrained in us, because that's our team. The Bills are our team, and we hope that you enjoy the content we're bringing you.
So thanks, guys, and we'll catch you on the next one.